Hey, welcome back, everybody. In March of 2020, under the authorization of the HEROES Act, President Trump paused student debt payments and the accrual of interest. Joe Biden extended this policy under the same authorization, but he went a step further by offering forgiveness of $10,000 per outstanding debt and up to $20,000 for those qualifying for a Pell Grant. 6 separate cases were brought against the government by Republican states, along with 2 individual plaintiffs to stop the forgiveness program because Republicans hate the working class. UNFTR. Beyond being an explainer video of what's going on with student debt and some historical context, make sure to stick to the end because there's a rather elegant and simple solution that I'm going to give you that no one's really talking about. How's that for a teaser? But let's look at the here and now. As we speak, the Supreme Court is considering the lawsuits, and honestly, it doesn't look good for student debt holders. While payments remain on pause through the summer, it's looking increasingly likely that the Supreme Court is going to side with the plaintiffs who were somehow granted standing by the appellate division after being knocked down in the lower courts. So standing is the concept that a person or a plaintiff bringing a suit is somehow injured and therefore has a relevant claim. 2 quick thoughts on this before we get into the gory details. The first thought is that it's preposterous that these plaintiffs are considered to have standing. No one is injured by student debt relief. It's a bogus claim, which leads to point number 2. The appellate division. 3 Republican judges appointed by George W. Bush made these cases possible. But the Supreme Court didn't have to agree to take these cases. In fact, you can tell just as much about a court by the cases that it decides to hear as much as the rulings that it hands down. In this case, there's no question that they were on the hunt to defy the Biden administration, and I'm betting that that's how it's going to play out in the decision. That's the definition of an activist court, and this court is settling scores with Democrats as though Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh might be dying. Now, in case anyone on earth is wondering why Republicans would be against a debt relief program that predominantly impacts the working poor in this nation, here's one of the Fox News resident legal scholars to explain the grievance.
This asinine, I want to pay off student debt, is an insult to the senior citizens, to the people who pay taxes, to people who decide, do I want to buy meat this week or pay for my medicine? That's hogwash. You got so many jobs, you got a great economy, let them work and pay off their bills just the way all of us do.
Oh, the last time I saw a mouth like that, it had a hook in it. First off, there are senior citizens still paying off student loans. In fact, there are even seniors who have student debt payments deducted from their Social Security benefits. Think about that. Also, when Jeanine Pirro went to school, bread was 7 cents and gas was 10. Over the last 40 years, tuition has increased 180%, but average wages in the United States have only grown 17% over the same period. Jackass. Right now, there are 43 million Americans managing more than $1.6 trillion in student loans. And relief advocates like Senator Elizabeth Warren often make the point that many student debt holders don't have the additional credit or savings to buy a home, which is why so many younger people are putting off home ownership. Her argument is that trading student debt relief for better debt that builds equity and provides security is way more favorable in the long run. The arguments pretty much line up like this. On the left, proponents of debt cancellation say it alleviates enormous stress and burden on the lower and middle classes of the country. Now the middle. Those in the middle recognize the stress of student loans but claim it would be yet another gift to high earners who can afford to pay off their loans because they presumably finished college and can get better jobs. And on the right. And those on the right are apoplectic because it's yet another in a string of unearned entitlements and that those who took on debt did so willingly and therefore they're obligated. One at a time now. The vast majority of student debt holders in this country live paycheck to paycheck, and yes, there are still senior citizens saddled with debt, so point to the left. High net worth families and individuals don't have student debt. That's not how it works, nor has it ever. See point 1, and another point to the left. And as for the right, who think that it's a handout that steals money from the government, the SBA forgave more than $750 billion in PPP loans so far. This money was treated as below-the-line income and therefore non-taxable. In other words, free money. So what about them? Or the hundreds of billions of dollars in tax cuts under Bush, and then Obama, and Trump that favored the wealthy? Where is the entitlement argument there? So let's go through some nuances to this issue and give it some additional context. Publicly financed student debt has origination fees around 4% and the interest rate on the debt is over 7%. Hold that thought. The promise of education as a path to earning potential has been sold to us since the Eisenhower administration, when the original student debt financing plans were conceived. Literally every single administration since that time has attempted to find the right fit solution to put Americans through college without burying them in debt. But it comes back to one fateful decision from the beginning of the conversation, that higher education should be seen as an obligation to shoulder with government assistance, rather than a right of citizenship. Hold that thought as well. One of the worst actors in this drama is a company called Sallie Mae. What started out as a Rube Goldberg plan to hold federal student loans off the federal balance sheet wound up being privatized in the 1980s with a significant twist and a fatal flaw. See, most people probably think of Sallie Mae as a government program. It's not. It's a for-profit corporation that went public in 1983, and some of the largest institutional investors in the world have a huge stake in it, because it's a bookie scheme. Before it went public, Sallie Mae was looking to break totally free from government oversight, as it was originally a quasi-public benefit company with some restraints. And the federal government didn't know what to do with the ever-increasing demand for student loans. So they made a deal with Congress to institutionalize a form of arbitrage, whereby Congress guaranteed Sallie Mae an additional 3.5% over its existing loan rate on every loan, and to allow Sallie Mae to tap into the market by offering shares of the company, essentially guaranteeing profits for Sallie Mae and setting it free to operate in the free market. Basically, it became a guaranteed cash cow, no matter how the portfolio of loans performed, and it was free to take on public equity on the stock exchange. So when it went public, the company exploded. Now let's mix in colleges. The more money Sallie Mae took from going public, the more it was incentivized to lend, so they loosened the requirements. The more money that the students were able to obtain, the higher the colleges pushed tuition, and on and on and on. Of course, on the other side of a college education, there wasn't always a high-paying job awaiting. And every time the country fell into recession, the harder it was to get that job and to pay off debt. But the colleges kept raising tuition. So as inflation surpassed even the middle-income earners over the decades, the disparity worsened, and so did the despair. But for the colleges, the money kept rolling in, which is why a university such as Harvard has a sticker price of $75,000 to $80,000 per year, despite having over $50 billion in their endowment. They collect it because they can. And the more money they raise and spend turning campuses into Disneyland, the more the public colleges feel the need to raise funds to compete. And the beat goes on. So look, the program that Biden is offering is pretty solid in terms of alleviating current burdens, but it doesn't do much to fix the underlying problem. So go back to that idea that in other countries, higher education is seen as a right, and therefore it's publicly financed. We made the opposite decision, but it didn't start out that way. For example, most community and state colleges and universities were wholly subsidized in the past. But as time wore on and state budgets were slashed during the hard times, state legislatures would begin chipping away at the funding, bit by bit. Colleges would compensate by charging tuition that was still far more reasonable. But as the private colleges and universities started raking in the student loan funds and packing away their endowments, they started investing heavily into infrastructure and teacher salaries. The public institutions had no choice but to try and compete, and so tuition began to creep. That's how we wound up here. It's why the average debt burden over the past decade alone has gone from $24,700 per student to more than $36,000. One good aspect of the relief plan that is also now in the air is a 20-year cap on payments, a 5% income threshold, and a bid to streamline the public service forgiveness program, which is super complicated but already exists. But here's the part that I promised to talk to you about, the part that no one is addressing, and hear me out. Sallie Mae shouldn't exist. There should be no room for a private lender in this marketplace. And before you get all free market sentimental on me, it's a relatively new phenomenon in the grand scheme of things, and it wasn't intended to be this way. Furthermore, there is no logical, practical, or fiduciary reason to charge such high interest rates on student loans. There's one simple solution to both of these problems, and it would fix a massive problem going forward. Charge the lowest rate possible for student loans and get rid of origination fees. Refinance all student debt at the average rate of 50-year inflation, which is 3.8%. That cuts interest in half. Getting rid of origination fees ensures that 100% of the loan goes towards tuition. And it makes all outstanding loans, even the private ones, and from Sallie Mae, eligible for refinancing, no questions asked. And that puts them all out of business. And there's another benefit: fewer defaults. My guess is that if you put this to the actuarial test, you would quickly discover that the decrease in defaults would more than make up for the loss of revenue from the decrease in interest rates charged. Okay, smart guy, what stops the private colleges and universities from increasing tuition even more to make up for the savings that were achieved? Well, that brings us back to the second important part of the plan, and for this, let's go all the way back to the Johnson administration. One of LBJ's proposals that he actually wasn't able to get across the finish line was a shared risk pool, and it's brilliant. It wasn't as though people couldn't foresee the games that the colleges would play, right? So LBJ's plan was to force these institutions to put skin in the game by creating a shared risk pool that all colleges and universities have to pay into if they want to be eligible to receive federal loan payments for their students. The greater the percentage of debt required to pay for the tuition, the greater the premium colleges have to pay to participate. These funds could also be used to offset any defaults so the government isn't left guaranteeing those loans, and to help subsidize community colleges in the same states the private colleges are located. While you chew on this, let me give you a little more ammunition lest you start feeling sorry for private colleges. Not a single college or university in this country pays property taxes. Not one. Now, in the spirit of arming you with talking points, let's go through the big ones. Ready? Rich people don't carry student debt, so student debt relief isn't regressive. Tuition and debt have blown past the rate of inflation and wage growth, so Boomer and Gen X debt isn't the same as Millennial and Gen Z debt. Private colleges and private lenders, like Sallie Mae, are the bad guys. Make colleges pay to play and put Sallie Mae out of business. There are senior citizens still paying off student debt and even having their Social Security benefits garnished. Why is $500 billion in student loan relief over a decade socialism, but $750 billion in PPP loan forgiveness over 3 years is capitalism at its finest? The Supreme Court is probably going to strike down this plan. Hopefully someone in the administration is paying attention to the options on the table and takes this opportunity to completely reimagine the business of student debt in this country. Hey, a boy can dream.
Oh, one thing I almost forgot.
Oh, one more thing before we go. One of the things that we really stand behind on the podcast is that we provide as many sources and resources for the information that we provide as humanly possible. It's really mission critical and super important to us that we back everything up with solid research. So, in that spirit, we have a segment called Book Love. And in Book Love, we try to pick out one of the best books to illustrate everything that we're talking about in that particular episode. So, for this one, I would encourage everybody to read something called The Debt Trap. It's by Josh Mitchell, and it is outstanding. I'll leave a link to it in show notes, but it really goes through the whole history of how student debt became such a problem in this country. So anyway, that's it for now. Thanks everybody for coming along, and we'll catch you in the next video. Here endeth the lesson.